Hello again, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Calimesa Insider Podcast. City Manager Will Kolbow here. It is officially summertime, and the weather is certainly showing it. It's all of a sudden got really warm. It's no coincidence that summer is here. Just real quick, I just wanted to start on a personal note. This has been a roller coaster of emotions in the Kolbow household this last week. So shortly after I recorded our podcast last week, later on that night, we put down our dog that we had for the last 10 years. I think she was about 2 or 3 years old when we got her. She was a rescue, but she is the first pet that our kids actually remember getting. So we had other pets before, but they were pets that my wife and I had before that we had children. So they all remember bringing her home. So that was a pretty tough one. Very, really, really good dog. So we were sad about that. And then yesterday, my daughter left for the East Coast for a summer of ballet training. She'll be spending 5 weeks in Boston and 2 weeks in New York. She's 12 years old. And my wife went with her to get her moved in. She's staying at Boston University in the dorms there. So she's moving in tomorrow. And then my wife will be coming back home next week on Tuesday. And then later on this summer, we're going to all drive out to meet my daughter when she's done in Boston. Then we're all going to take the Amtrak down to New York. And she's going to be in New York for 2 weeks training with the American Ballet Theater. Now, the interesting thing about that one is that my wife's going to have to stay with her. So my wife is going to spend 2 weeks basically staying right near Times Square. So a great, summer for my daughter. She's going to get back with about 2 days to spare before school starts right back up again. Meanwhile, one of my sons started practicing with the high school cross-country team. My boys are going into high school this year. My other son, he goes to Code Ninjas, and he's very close to getting his black belt. So hopefully that'll get done. So just a lot of things happening in the Kolbow household. So I just wanted to start with that because, it's a reminder that city managers are people too. We've got real lives, real families, and we go through the ups and downs of life just like anybody else. I think sometimes we tend to dehumanize city officials and government officials, but at the end of the day, outside of our jobs, we're still normal people just like anybody else. So, there's ups and there's downs, and we experienced a little bit of everything this week. So it's been really interesting. So let's now get to business. So we had a city council meeting this past Monday. There was a swearing in of the newest member of the Citizens on Patrol, Ken Friesen. We honored the Yucaipa Calimesa Joint Unified School District. So the California League of Educators selected Mesa View Middle School as a California school to watch. And Mesa View Middle School campus security staff member Isaiah Joyner was named the California State Classified School Employee of the Year for the entire state. Really, really impressive. And it was so nice to see so many staff members from Mesa View coming out to celebrating the school's honor of being a California school to watch, and then also seeing their fellow teammate get recognized for such a prestigious award. So it was really nice to celebrate the school district and having Callie Binks, the superintendent, great lady. Can't say enough good things about her. So it was nice to have them in attendance at our last council meeting. We also honored outgoing Cabazon Lieutenant Chris Olson and our guest later on in the program, Captain Evan Petersen. We received a report from the Calimesa Chamber of Commerce. Of note, speaking of the Sheriff's Department, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco will be the speaker at their monthly breakfast meeting on Tuesday, August 13th at 7:30 a.m. at House Bistro here in Calimesa. This one always sells out, and it's actually the only breakfast of the year that they sell tickets to. So make sure to make your reservation to attend this event at calimesachamber.com/events. I plan to be there, and so I hope you plan to be there too. It should be a great event. There was a public hearing on trash rates, as I mentioned last week. That was adopted by the council. So a 1.97% increase will go into effect July 1st, 2024. And finally, the city council approved an agreement with the Beaumont Cherry Valley Recreation and Park District to provide maintenance services at Summerwind Park. This may lead to other services. Remember, we have 2 other parks besides Summerwind, and so the maintenance Summerwind is our largest park, so we want to see how this partnership works out with the Parks District, and I have no reason to believe that it won't work out well. But we want to see how things go, if they can handle it, if it works for them as well, and can integrate our other parks to their schedule. So if things work out, we can look possibly expanding services with the Parks District to include 4th Street Park and Creekside Park. If you want to see the city council meeting, you can view the entire thing at cityofcalimesa.net/YouTube, and then go to the live tab. You'll be able to find the meeting there. And just a reminder, our next meeting is Monday, July 15th at 6 p.m. There's no meeting on July 1st. So last night, I, along with Mayor Pro Tem Wendy Hewitt and Councilmember Linda Molina, attended the WRCOG General Assembly. That's the Western Riverside County Council of Governments. And now at this event, they vote and all elected officials are allowed to vote. They vote on the WRCOG fiscal year 25 budget and the appointment of new officers to the executive committee. So the chair, the first vice chair, the second vice chair, and really it's the selection of the second vice chair that matters, because second vice chair goes to first vice chair becomes chair. So you just have this 3-year cycle. So once you're second vice chair, in 2 years you'll be the chairperson. California State Controller Malia Cohen also spoke at the event, but the main speaker for the event was Sean McVay, head coach of the LA Rams. That was pretty cool. And so you're probably, and I was wondering myself, before he spoke, I figured, but I kind of guessed, and I guessed right. I was wondering, what is Sean McVay going to say to a bunch of elected officials and their staffs? What are they going? What message is he going to have? Because he's not a politician, obviously. But he, of course, spoke about leadership, and that's always a lesson that is good to hear. We always like to hear leadership lessons. So that was pretty cool to hear him talk, and he's a very good speaker, and you can tell that he's that's what makes one of the things that makes him a good coach is he's a very good communicator, and you could tell just by the way he presented himself, the way he presented his information. And then they had a Q&A after that too, and he was able to answer the questions, just like he's answering questions from the press after, a game on Sunday. So it was pretty cool to see him there. So that was this just last night, actually. Okay, so now let's get to the good stuff. Joining me on the podcast right now is the outgoing captain of the Cabazon station for the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, who also serves, by the way, as the Calimesa Police Chief, Captain Evan Petersen. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thanks a lot for having me, Will.
So as your tenure with the Sheriff's Department is coming to an end, and we'll get to why a little bit later, I wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about your illustrious career and your time serving Calimesa. So first of all, what motivated you to get into law enforcement?
Yeah, I was in college, and my dad had a very successful business, and the setup in the Petersen house was you're going to take over ultimately what turned out to be an overhead conveyor business. As I worked a couple summers there during college, I knew at that point in my life that I didn't want to be stuck to a desk reviewing plans and things like that for engineering type stuff. And I kind of had this calling. It really spoke to me. And so ultimately, I remember coming to them near the end of college and saying, hey, I applied to Riverside County and LA County Sheriff. Both ended up hiring me within the same week or offering me a job within the same week. And I grew up Rancho Cucamonga area, and so was more familiar with the Inland Empire, quite frankly, in the end. And ultimately went down that path right fresh out of college, started the academy, and landed in the jail. And as I look back, me having, I'll say, zero street experience in my early days as a fresh college kid, it was very good that I landed in the jail and got educated very quickly.
So in your career, you had a long career, you've had a lot of different assignments. What would you call your most interesting assignment?
I will say I ran homicide for 3 years for the department. And for our department in those days would have been about 2010 to 2013. Um, it was very gratifying in the one hand of obviously these people's worst day, I have to admit, but I will never forget some of those interactions with those, I'll call it victim families, when maybe we finally caught the bad guy and ultimately were able to put closure to a case that you could see the trauma, you could see it was hurting. I was there at the onset, and ultimately years later we would be there at the close of a lot of these cases. And I will say just it was extremely gratifying. And that's that part where they make movies about obviously murder investigations, and all of that stuff is very popular in the TV world. In real life, it massively takes an emotional toll. I watched it in the guys. They're the actual detectives. They're exceptionally passionate about it, and being on the receiving end of some of those notifications and things with that family, I could see why. And so as I look back, really, that one stands out a heck of a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I do have a follow-up question on that. I think that you kind of touched upon something that I think is something that has become a more and more prevalent in terms of actually focusing and acknowledging, and that's the mental health aspect of
Yeah.
a law enforcement career. What has the sheriff's department done over your time with the department in terms of recognizing that and trying to help with the mental health of deputies and officers?
I think it's interesting as I look back at near the beginnings of my career, 28, some 30 years ago. I hate to say it, those bad behaviors of watching guys being heavy drinking and things like that that were not very centered on helping you through an emotional roller coaster of a career. Uh, it really did change in the last decade and a half to whether it was more physical activity, whether it was going towards actually, in the beginning days for me, it was absolutely taboo to, I will say, speak to a mental health professional. It was just very frowned upon in what would be ultimately in those days a very strong boys club. As it has changed the dynamic through the years, and as we as a society recognize police suicides were on the rise, and in part because of all the horrible things that we see and do and are a part of, that they had to start recognizing and changing the narrative on, especially the mental health professional side, getting away from when you need an outlet, turning to alcohol and other things that were not obviously healthy and savvy and good for you, and focusing on your family, focusing on, I will say, the Bible and your faith, and other things became much more popular that we were able to talk about that at the start of my career, you were never able to discuss.
That's good. That's good to hear. I think that helps morale, it seems, and also, it overall health too, right? So that's good to know.
We have an entire wellness division now that was created within the last several years under Sheriff Bianco, in fact, and largely driven by all of that. As Sheriff Bianco and that cadre of leaders I haven't came up under, they were largely my FTOs and those years up right in front of me, and so us seeing the failures of the family, the trauma to the individual, and all those kind of things we saw were not good in that national police narrative going towards, I hate to say it, police suicides and stuff like that. It was very much a recognition of, hey, we need to change, and it's time for a change to help have healthy careers and all those kind of things that go along with that.
That's good. That's good. So, again, obviously in a long career, a lot of different assignments. What is the craziest or weirdest thing that happened during your career, would you say?
We, you know, you could go a lot of directions with that question. The things we see on TV, the police chases, the foot chases, the over the fences, the rescuing, saving people, all those things do happen. I will say, as we've had cops come with us through the years, cops really is a very good rendition of a day to day that could be 99% nothing, and then all of a sudden the explosion happens. and a wide variety of things are occurring. Um, I have I have met presidents in my career. I've shut down freeways and walked an entire mile of a freeway that looking for a single shell casing. I've done things that as I drive down the freeway or as I look at areas now that I flash back to 15, 20 years ago on certain things that we've done that, yeah, it's incredible. You would never think of. And I look at certain parts of the 15 freeway that, as you well know, where you live, are massively busy. And yet I've looked at, oh, I remember the year we shut down an entire mile section and had to walk every inch of it arm's length across 25 of us in looking for a single shell casing, and just interesting things that I never thought I'd experience. Like I said, in meeting a president and being on an inner circle of one of the visits and things like that, that it has. It's been quite a ride. Quite a ride.
Nice, nice. So now let's focus a little bit on Calimesa. You were only
Yeah.
here in this
Yeah.
station for about a year.
Yeah.
But what the thing I've noticed, and I've said this to you at our last council meeting too, is that I believe things have changed for the better in terms of the service provided to our community. Can you tell us about any changes that you made or things that you saw that needed to be fixed
Sure.
in how their services are delivered to Calimesa?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the first things I noticed, and I will take this phrase from you because when you said it, I've absolutely used it, and I recognized it as being a past area citizen, living obviously where I do, right next to the city. And so you mentioned roughly to me of it's been interesting having the development of Summer Wind in that area and us becoming a tale of two cities, where I saw, as the Petersen family has done. We've gone to George's Market and Thai Chili and things in Calimesa forever. The 20 years that I've lived in the Pass area, and then recognizing when off Cherry Valley, now we get a brand new Stater Brothers, and it's where we're shopping, and new homes are going in. And I saw immediately that tale of two cities of different dynamics and different expectations in those areas. And it led to, when I landed, number one, being very open about the communication. I gave out my cell phone, my personal cell phone. I gave it out absolutely every meeting I went to with you, or city show up events, and people would ask me a question, and I would say, hey, let's absolutely talk on Monday. And so some of those, I will say, I had very eye-opening citizen conversations where not only were they educated, but I could tell they were then like, hey, I never thought of it that way. I'm going to spread the word in the neighborhood because none of us knew or none of us had that kind of idea. So the interaction piece I felt, and immediate access to, I'll say, the police chief part, what I found huge for me personally in me being able to talk to, I will say, key citizens that would spread a message in the neighborhood for me and things like that, that it went miles for me when I could then turn around and text that person and say, hey, just so you know, we had an accident down the street, and tell everybody in the neighborhood to avoid that area. I got huge kudos for that kind of stuff. The guys, the actual deputies, they're busy with calls. They're busy with actually handling the day-to-day business of things. I just could tell that it was the citizen information stream could be so much better, I will say, navigated rather than just open-ended Facebook questions and stuff where people didn't have any ideas, so they would create their own narrative. If I just openly helped talk to some of these key citizens, and they helped me spread messages. The other piece that when I landed that I thought was important was our visibility part. You and I talked about that right from the beginning regarding our levels of service, and me knowing the actual call volume we had and things like that. Our levels of service are very good, but the actual visibility part was important to me. And so it was getting out. It was doing reports out in the field. It was making it so that, hey, park in the Stater Brothers Shopping Center and write your reports instead of writing your reports at the substation. That visibility piece instantly made it this last year. So our crime trends, which I landed and I saw, they were pretty low. Man, they went down drastically with me pushing that narrative of give me more visibility in the city, and you will see it translate to you taking less calls.
I remember you saying that actually when I interviewed the first time around,
Yeah,
when you had first started with the city, and
yeah,
that was one of the things that you said is that when you asked the bad guys, hey, why did you hit Calimesa Boulevard? Well, because I
yeah,
don't see a
yeah,
vehicle, I don't see a squad car
yeah,
there.
yeah,
So you've touched upon that, and so I'm glad that has made a difference, and so
yeah,
that's
yeah,
something that we definitely would like to see continue.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. I agree.
So you've touched upon this before, and I think you kind of touched upon this even with in your answer before. But what would you say to those that say we don't have adequate sheriff's protection?
The as it's the job of the person who sits in my seat before me, and obviously when I landed and after me, as I've set up Captain Northrup taking over how I introduced him at City Council the other night. You know, I did the actual car theft calls. I did the burglary calls. That's the deputy's job now. And so the person that sits in my seat is to constantly evaluate and monitor where our police services are related to the call volume, related to that uh, level of service. We do our spot checks. I ask sergeants to call and follow up with certain victims and certain, quite frankly, witnesses and others. Hey, you were a witness to something that happened at Stater Brothers the other night. How was your interaction with the department? Oh, they were fantastic. Or oh, you know what? It was really slow, and we waited a long time. Those are the things that I'm looking for that sits in my seat now. And so those parts to where I look at, as I mentioned in even some of the public safety meeting we had, where I was watching call volume rise, and we got to a level of now 7,000 calls a year. Well, it steadied off the last couple of years, and we have stayed at 7,000. And I think you and I have had some of those discussions of in the future, should big home development start again, we may have to start talking about police service. But in the interim, as we look at those stats regularly, obviously, I know that hey, we're far in front of the curve. One of those stats, and you asked me for it even on what is the call volume that the citizens call in versus deputy initiated calls. And that was very eye opening as I hadn't analyzed that part of it before. I did it only station wide. And I got to see in Calimesa that nearly 57 to 60% of a call volume for a day is called in by a citizen. The other 40% was done by a deputy. That told me that as opposed to Moreno Valley and other cities that I watched that are much, much busier than us, that those deputies are going call to call to call and have zero time for, I will say, routine patrol, stopping people on the street, doing car stops and things. I felt very fortunate that 40%, the deputies were putting to good use in doing those citizen contacts, doing those what we call pedestrian checks. Guys walking down the streets, hey, what are you doing here? I was just passing through from Santa Monica. Great, let me help you get back to Santa Monica or wherever else you need to go to, kind of thing.
Yes.
That part of me seeing that statistic of that 40% made me feel very good about where we are in police services in the city, that they still have time to initiate things and thus further make it visible in the city.
You did touch upon that about looking at some of the other cities. I mean, how does that ratio compare to other places, or even maybe at
Yeah,
Cabazon station wide?
yeah, yeah. The busyness level of particular areas tells you what the call volume deputy, what we do every day. Deputies are required to fill out a log. It's done digitally, and then they review it and they sign it off. And that call log then gets turned in and ultimately goes through my crime analysis division. And I get to see, as the police chief, weekly, monthly, what deputy call logs look like, what they're doing on the day to day, and things like that. In your busier stations that have a hell of a lot of calls, it makes it to where they really do have no time to do some of those routine patrol things. When you see two guys walking down the street and it's 110 out, yet they're in full hoodies and black and they're walking into a store, hey, that's the kind of clue that us police recognize. Hey, I need to stop them. In the super city, busy cities, it's difficult to when we have other emergencies to get to because the call volume is so high that you need to get to those calls rather than do that proactive stopping those people. And maybe that changes them. Maybe they're not going to rob the store or the bank or things like that. And they like hey, the police in Calimesa, we need to move on. Those guys are hot on us. That kind of perspective is often what we look for in balancing if I have enough services in the city or not. And so for Calimesa, I do. I felt very blessed that nearly 40% of their time they have free, and I'm watching them self-initiate calls.
That's good to hear. I mean, that does make us, I think it makes the community feel safer, because I think that means that they are safer as a result of that. So I think it's not just a feeling, it's empirical.
Yeah,
so
I'd agree with you. I'd agree.
Good. So obviously one of the reasons that I brought you on the program is, number one, I enjoy talking to you. I could probably talk to you every day. But also, obviously, like as I mentioned at the beginning, that you're wrapping up your career, but that's not the end for you, right? This is just you're going on to your next career. Tell us about your new gig. What's going on with that?
I was I passed year 28 and was kind of looking at, okay, in our police world, the closer you get to 30 years, is the time to start retiring and looking at other things. And my wife and I were really looking for what is that next avenue for us. I'm 51. My dad is working into his late 70s, and he has always told me, hey, the reality is you continue working or you die. Well, I recognize that's probably not true, but that is what I've grown up under in this strong German household that I've watched grown up under. And so for me, I knew I couldn't do nothing at the age I was. And so I just kind of started recognizing, looking for that sign. And then out of the blue, I got a call from the Riverside Sheriff's Association, the Sheriff's Deputy Union. And it's not just sheriff's deputy. We have probation, we have the DA's office, and other law enforcement entities across Riverside County. They are ran by an executive board, and they always employ an executive director to run the day-to-day business of what is a very large union. There's a political arm, there's a medical trust arm, there's a charity arm. I will say there are a lot of arms to what is the actual deputy union. I went through a competitive process with them and was unanimously selected to take over as their executive director of running the day-to-day business of the deputy union, which will involve some DC time, some Sacramento time, and all parts in between, as I understand, as they navigate the legal world and political world and things like that related to law enforcement.
Well, I think they picked a great one in you. Obviously, you have a lot of knowledge and experience in the department, so you have a really good perspective on what the deputies members are going through because you've been in their shoes. But also you have a really good ability to communicate clearly. You're very personable. And so I think that will serve you well in your role. So they definitely made a great choice. So congratulations. We're sorry to see you go. We knew this day was going to come at some point. We were just hoping it was a little bit longer, but you got to do what you got to do. And we were happy for the time that we had you. So and we're looking forward to looking with Captain Northrup too. So I think that's going to hopefully continue what you've started here.
As it was important to me, being a resident of the Pass area, to also hopefully get a replacement, I did. I felt very thankful from the sheriff that Captain Northrup, also being a hometown guy and shopping and going to the same places and things like that in Calimesa, I could see everything you guys told me at the beginning that was a big plus, and I could certainly, as me being a resident of next door city, see why. And so really, I feel the same as he and I have been talking a lot about it this last week. And I think it's going to be very good.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for joining us. And I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. And obviously, we're going to stay in touch. We're going to hit the link soon. So I'm looking forward to that as well. As soon as you're healed, of course.
Good. Fantastic.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Will.
And there he goes. What a great career. And just a wonderful human being, Evan Petersen is. Even though it was just a year, his impact on this community will be felt for years to come, I think. It really has been that impactful. And so we were very grateful for him and all his contributions. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the podcast this week. Just a reminder, there is no city council meeting on July 1st. Usually we meet on the first and third Mondays, but we are going dark for July. So our next city council meeting will be July 15th. We will, of course, have several podcasts between now and then. But in the meantime, between now and the next council meeting, mark your calendars for the groundbreaking of the expansion of 4th Street Park, soon to be known as Mountain View Park. That'll take place again on Monday, July 8th at 11 a.m. And also join us for our ladder truck and new Engine 1 push-in ceremony. That'll take place at the Calimesa Fire Department on Monday, July 15th, right before the City Council meeting at 5 p.m. So, until next time, have a great weekend, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you for joining us.